A while ago, I had a bit of a cast-on fever, and while I like having multiple projects on the needles at a time for some variety, at a certain point I do start losing track of everything I'm doing, so I had to set a few projects aside while I worked on some more important things first. But now I'm picking this particular one back up, a cardigan project I'm making using a pattern from 1920. Since I've already started it prior to filming any of this, I'll just do a quick recap of what the project is and how I'm getting on with it so far, and hopefully that won't be too disjointing, and you can follow along with the rest of the making of this cardigan. The pattern I'm using is this one here. It's called sweater number 8446, although I'm just calling it the seed stitch cardigan or the seed stitch wrap cardigan because it's a little easier to remember than just a number. And I'm not following this design exactly. Instead, I'm going to omit entirely this bottom section with the pockets down here. And I guess it's sort of for two reasons. Firstly, I'm not confident that I have enough yarn to have the sweater go all the way down to about hip level, and secondly, I think having a cropped style would actually be kind of cute, and I do like the look of this. I think it's interesting and it also looks nice, but I kind of like the idea of a cropped wrap cardigan for summer, so that's the idea of what I'm going for. So I will knit down the front, but instead of continuing down here, I'm going to stop here and have it end at the sash. The yarn I'm using is called Barocco Spree. It's a wool and cotton blend with a slight marled or heathered look, though I'm not quite sure about the correct terminology there. It seems like it'll be a really nice versatile yarn, especially for transition seasons when the weather isn't very warm nor very cold. Onto the cardigan itself. When you first see it, you'll probably immediately notice the strange construction it has. It's pretty unusual, even for vintage patterns, but I've noticed this construction is pretty common for the late 19-teens and early 1920s era. It's knit in one piece, starting at the bottom of the back, and the arms are added onto the sides to make a T-like shape. So this means there are no shoulder seams and only seams along the sides and underarms. Because it's started from the back up, it is pretty difficult to hold it up to myself to see if it's long enough without stretching it too much and without tweaking several muscles in my shoulders. So I relied on a tape measure and also volunteered my trusty assistant, aka my mom, multiple times to help me with this part. I still needed a bit more length on it at this point because even though it will be a cropped cardigan, I wanted it to measure from just below my natural waist so that I wouldn't have to tug it down constantly. So I just kept on knitting and knitting and knitting, which felt like it took absolutely forever between having so many stitches on my needle and it being entirely in seed stitch, which seems to grow at a complete snail's pace. It was definitely a test of patience at times on this project. So it has been a long time since I've done any sort of updates on this. It won't seem like that to you, but I can't even remember the last time I filmed anything about this project. It's a bit of a tangled disaster at the moment, and I do have 2 balls of yarn connected to it, which is making the whole situation worse, but I'll see if I can untangle it to show you kind of sort of where I am right now. So here we are. I think that's about as untangled as I'm gonna get it right now. And what I've done is I've completely finished the back, and right here I've bound off for the back of the neck like this. I've also finished the sleeves on both sides, here and here. And on this side here you can see the full sleeve like this, but it will end up being sewn together like this, like it's shown on this side. I've clipped it together so that I could try it on. So that's what the sleeve will sort of end up looking like. And the part I'm onto right now is working over the shoulder down the front of the sweater. So that's what this needle is for right here. So I've got my sleeve, the back of my neck, and here I'm working down the front. And as you can see, I've been increasing at the neck to start to create that crossover so that it can turn into the cross front wrap cardigan. I'm not sure if that explanation really made any sense at all. It's a little difficult to visualize and to explain, but hopefully it made at least a tiny bit of sense, and maybe I'll try this on as it is if I can not get tangled in all these balls of yarn, and maybe that will illustrate it a little bit better. So I've been knitting down the front of this, continuing to increase, and I just happened to stop here and realized I'm already right at the spot basically where I stop increasing and start to knit straight down for a couple of inches. And I've sort of pinned the sides in place just to make sure everything's lined up, and it's probably apparent, but this is not close enough to the side to match up with the side seam, or at least be close to the side seam. So I'm going to have to try it on to double check the fit, because obviously it's going to fit differently on me than laying flat on a table, but it does seem that I'm probably going to need to go back and increase a little bit more rapidly. And there is going to be some stretch put on this because there's going to be ties, it's going to be a wrap cardigan, so it is going to have tension put under it. So I'm going to have to keep that in mind, but I do still think I'm going to need to increase a little bit more in order to get it as far to the side as I need it to be. And that's why I put in all of these lifelines here. It might seem a little excessive, and honestly it probably is a bit excessive, but it's partially for peace of mind and partially for instances like this where I probably do need to go back and fix something, because I'm working with an antique pattern in one size and trying to make it fit myself, so mistakes are bound to happen. I'm all tangled up in the yarn here, but let's see. I kind of feel like now that I've put it on and putting it under the tension it'll have with the ties in order to keep it like nice and snug while I'm wearing it, I almost feel like it's a good fit now. Like it didn't seem like it, but and it doesn't go all the way over to this side, but there will be ties attached to it like that, that might actually be kind of a good fit, I think. Yeah, I think I might go with this. I might trust the intuition and go with this fit. And hopefully it won't be a disaster. So I've just finished knitting down the left front, just like the right front, and then I did go back to the right front, which is going to be laying on top, and I knit just a few extra rows, like 5 or so extra rows here, to accommodate for any of the pulling up that's going to happen as a result of the ties pulling it this way, and also the bust is going to be pulling it up slightly, so I don't want it to end up higher than the back is. So I just did like 5 or so extra rows to accommodate for that a little bit. So I've got the pattern right here, and if I were following the pattern, it would have me cast off a bunch of stitches on the right front here before knitting down for this sort of flap slash pocket area thing. But since I'm not doing that, I'm going to bind off the entire right front and the entire left front, and then do the sashes or the ties that they have on this end. And for binding off the front, I do want to make sure that I choose a bind off that is pretty stretchy, because it's going to have to accommodate stretch across the body when I tie it. So I'm going to do a little research to figure out what kind of a bind off I want to use, and then get going on the sash ends. I think that the bind off worked really well. I think that's nice and stretchy, and it doesn't look too loose or messy or anything like that, so I'm happy with that result. And I have a grand total of this much done of the straps, or the ties, so it'll be something like that on this edge. And I think I need to about double this in length before I can move on to the next one, so I'm just knitting away on this piece. That's going about as excitingly as you can imagine for a narrow strip of plain garter stitch, which is to say, very monotonous. I also got a ball of this light gray color in the same yarn as the body of the sweater to use as the contrast color for the collar and the cuffs, and I think that could work fairly well. Then I had a look in my stash, and I noticed I had this ball of yarn, which is a totally different type of yarn and a totally different fiber makeup. It's a merino wool, silk, and yak blend. But when I was comparing these two, this one and this lighter gray color, I kind of decided that I actually like this other yarn, the color of this other yarn, a little bit better with the main body color. And that's because I don't know if it's very easy to pick up on the camera, but it's because this gray yarn has a little bit of heathering in it with a little bit of like a brown undertone to the heathering. And I feel like this natural color plays with that really nicely, and I kind of prefer that to the light gray. I also thought that the slightly fuzzy texture of this yarn would work really well as kind of a contrast to the texture of the main body sweater yarn. So yeah, I think that would be pretty nice. And I think the original pattern also has you using like a fuzzier yarn for the collar and cuffs. So I feel like that will kind of offer a nice contrast. So hopefully that will work out nicely, and I will see you when I've done some more progress. Welcome to the bathroom sink, aka the place that I block things. And I've decided to block this before I do any of the sewing up, just because there's a couple places I want to block a little bit more aggressively, and I figure that will be much easier if I can just have it as one big flat piece. I'm just going to wash it according to the directions, which is cold water, and I'm going to also put a little bit of wool wash in there, just because I like to do that when I block things and when I wash things. You'll notice I did put on the warm tap a little bit, but that's just because where I live, if you put on only the cold tap, you will get Arctic cold water, absolutely frigid water. Despite my efforts, the water is still absolutely frigid and it feels like my hands are going to fall off. I've been waiting for a few days, but my contrast color yarn has finally arrived in the mail. Now I can finally get back to working on this sweater, which I'm excited about because the end is very much in sight now. And while I could have sewn up my side seams in the meantime, that's definitely something I could have done. Did I feel like doing it? Apparently not. So what I'm going to do now that I have this contrast color is work on the shawl collar that goes all around here. And that entails casting on 3 stitches, increasing at one side by 1 stitch every other ridge until there are 18 stitches on the needle. Work even until collar reaches the center of the back. Okay, that makes half the collar, so then I do a duplicate piece of that. Here is 1/2 of my collar piece, which is almost done. I just have to knit it to the back of the neck. And it's going to go something like this, just eased in along this curve, like that. And this is where the tie is going to get sewn on. And it's right about now where I'm having a moment of self-doubt and of, is this going to actually look any good? And do I like this contrast color? And do I even like the collar at all? And all of the above. Insert self-doubt thought here. But at the same time, I've only done 1/2 of the collar, haven't even finished it, need to do the other half, so I'm not seeing the full picture there. I haven't done the contrast color for the cuffs either, so that's going to provide some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? That's going to sort of tie it together more once I have the contrast color both here and here. Once I do more of the contrast color stuff, I think it will start to come into view, and then I can probably do a better job at actually judging whether or not I like it. Hopefully I do like it, because I don't want to spend all this time and energy and work on something that I end up hating. So cross your fingers that I do end up liking it and that it looks good. I think at this point I actually can say that the end is in sight. I don't know why I said it earlier, because actually knitting the collar and attaching the collar and attaching the ties and picking up stitches for the cuffs and knitting the cuffs actually was a lot more than I probably realized at the time, and it almost felt like all of this took longer than the actual knitting of the body itself, so probably said that too soon. But now that I'm here with the collar finished and sewn on, the ties knit and sewn on, and finally got the cuffs down, I think I actually can say that the end is in sight now. And that's because really the last thing I have to do, I think, is to add the little trim or accents to the ends of these straps here. The pattern calls to make these little, I think it calls them drops, and it's just using the contrast color maybe, or I honestly can't tell from this picture, but I'm going to be using the contrast color, and they're just little crocheted bean things, bean-like objects that are sewn to the end of the ties here. But I was thinking instead of the drops, I might try to make little tassels instead, because I am known to appreciate a good tassel and to want to add them to probably as many things as I can, really. So if I can do a tassel here and it looks good and it works out, then I think that would be really nice. So that's what I'm going to try to do. First, I have to actually remember how to make a tassel, which is going to require me to look that up because I always forget. So yes, let's make the tassels now. Oh yeah, and I didn't show the process of me really making the cuffs or how I did that. And I think partially I just have not been doing very well energy-wise. I've been kind of in crash mode recently, so I have not really felt up to filming or talking very much. So I ended up just sort of doing this. And what I did basically was take some double pointed needles, and I just went around the cuff and picked up stitches along the edge. I picked up like 70 something stitches. Then I went around and I decreased a bunch to get 36 stitches. And then I started in a 1x1 rib pattern for 20 rows-ish. And I bound off using the same stretchy, semi-stretchy bind off that I used for the front of the wrap cardigan. All right, with my memory refreshed on how to make tassels, I have this book for my template, which I'm going to wrap around. This is Tales from Shakespeare. Tales from Shakespeare by Charles and Mary Lamb, if you're curious. Illustrated by F.G. Moorsum. Okay, I want to see the pictures. Ooh, look, how nice. Okay, anyway. So I take my yarn and I start wrapping around the book. 2, 3, 4, a couple more times. Okay, that's 18 times. Then we take a length of yarn and pass it under all of these threads. Bring that here to the top, tie it in a knot, and then I think I can slide it off of here. And now I have a beautiful tassel. That worked out well though. I don't actually see the knot at all around this top portion. So I feel like that tutorial was very good. I recommend it. If I can remember, I will link that in the description if you feel like making a nice looking tassel. Alright, the tassels are now on and I think they look really good. I love tassels, what can I say? So yeah, tassels are on and I believe I have gotten all of the ends woven in, hopefully. Yeah, looks like I have all my ends woven in, and I do believe it is time now that I can finally show it off to you. The final wrap cardigan. I'm really incredibly happy with the way this project turned out, especially considering how complex it was to resize the entire pattern, both in width and length, while maintaining the wrap front construction. It took me a long time to finish, about 4 months, with periods of having to set it down for a while, as is common for me with my energy limiting conditions. But I'm really glad I stuck it out to the end because I really love this cardigan. While I was hesitant about the contrast color at first, with the cuffs and collar and trim all done, I think it really works well in the overall look of the sweater. The yarn is a perfect weight and warmth, and isn't even overly warm in this 75-degree weather, but I know it'll be great to wear in another month or so. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you like vintage and historical fiber arts, sewing, knitting, crochet, and spinning, feel free to subscribe to follow along with my makes. I really enjoy making these videos and documenting my process with these projects. So thank you for watching, and especially if you made it all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.